Hi everyone, I'm Irina Bolychevsky, Shevsky on Twitter from re-decentralize.org. Essentially, if you look on our website, this is just lifted from it. We're in the midst of a digital revolution, information revolution, if you will. And actually, we're still at the early stages. A lot is happening. Things are changing very quickly. And we haven't worked all the different things out. You know, there have been certain business models that have come into play, but there is still a lot up in the air in terms of what is okay, what isn't okay, how do we protect people's privacy and rights, how do we ensure, you know, is the internet a public domain, you know, like a good that everyone should have access to at the same speeds, at the same right, is it something we sell? You know, we're still working it out, and the internet started off as being decentralized, and that was sort of one of the reasons it became so successful. Over time, it's become more and more centralized with a huge variety of traffic going through largely America and Google servers. And we want to change that. We want an alternative. Now, why? I think Stefan has talked a lot about this already. Privacy is one reason. Unless you're one of the people listening to Stefan's talking, being, wow, it's super handy when Google knows everything about me. I actually personally find it fairly useful at times that they know I'm in the UK, that I'm into all this kind of stuff, and I don't get all this pesky other search results that might distract me. But it's a serious issue. I think a lot of people I talk to say, well, what's the issue with the privacy stuff anyway? I haven't really done anything. But we often don't think about the fact that the services we use every single day, often Google, Facebook, Twitter, they are multi-billion-dollar companies, and we don't give them a penny. The money comes from somewhere. And often, we in some ways are the product. And even though you might not have notions of challenging the state or becoming the next Mandela or Gandhi, you will likely want to get a credit card one day, or a mortgage, or an insurance. And the problem with a lot of these capabilities is actually you can get blacklisted, and you might never be consulted or know why. Things will just happen from all these kind of big data gathering and algorithmization, and there's no way for you to sort of be aware of the decisions that are being made on your behalf about what you can and can't do, about what rights you do and don't have, because it's not actually clear and transparent and out in the open and regulated. And this is possible because it's so cheap to do. So one of the things that decentralization provides is it just makes it more expensive in many ways to surveil and pull in all of the data and all of the communication that is going through the internet. And that is valuable because then, ideally, security agencies would focus on people who are likely to be criminals and terrorists, and the rest of us can kind of get on in peace and not worry about how companies are trying to maximize profit in a way that might be very disadvantageous to us and might actually impinge on our rights. And as an aside, actually, I was talking to one of my friends recently who said, I wonder how many people die of terrorism attacks every year in the UK, for example. It's like, I mean, we couldn't think of the number, but we were like, it's probably pretty small. How many people die of car accidents every year? The number's going down, but it was about 2,000 a year recently in the UK alone. However, we are happy to, as a society, we are happy to pay that price. We don't ban cars. We are happy to do it for the comfort of having our own private vehicle to take us from A to B. You know, we're not satisfied with trains and buses. We need a car. However, we don't give the same weight to our privacy and, you know, internet neutrality and those kind of things. And that's just an interesting one to ponder of when people come back and say, well, we're doing it all for a good cause. The second reason So we've got these 4 motivations for it, doing re-decentralize. The second one is resilience. So the problem with centralized systems is that they are fragile, right? They can go down in a natural disaster, in an unnatural disaster, in a concerted cyber attack, or maybe Google might get nuked one day. I don't know where they're dissipated. And that would be a huge deal. It really would. I mean, I think we don't often recognize how much we really depend on these various services. And if they were just no longer available, how this would affect our daily lives and society. And obviously the ability of people in a disaster situation to get help. We want systems that are more resilient to attack, and decentralized systems provide that there's no single point of failure. The third reason is competition. I'm not sure this picture has anything to do with competition, but as far as I can tell, it's a Russian supermarket, possibly, or a grocery market. And the thing with competition is the way things have evolved is that business models are really about monopolization and data ownership. Right? So because you know the way the web's grown up, there are lots of free services, and either you're winning and you have a business model because everybody uses you because you're the search engine on the web, or because you have all of the people's information that you are able to get good deals on advertising and everything else. This means that actually, as a newcomer to the market, if those are the business models, it's really difficult, if not impossible, to compete. As a company that is in a place of monopoly, you also have no incentives to use open standards. So even though email is open, you know, if I have a Gmail account, I can still send emails to people who have Hotmail and Yahoo accounts, wonderful. Instant messaging is no longer so. So you know, people aren't all adopting XMPP. I can't use Google Talk to Twitter DM someone who, and then Facebook message someone else, and it's just not possible. These companies don't want to support that standard. But ultimately, if I want to communicate with somebody, what I want to do is I want to get in touch. I don't really care about the service they're using. And if you think if email was the same way, we wouldn't even be using email for work because it wouldn't be possible, right? Because if you can't, if someone is using a different email server to you in a different company, you wouldn't be able to get in touch. And this is part of the damaging effects of these kind of centralized, monopolized systems. And in many ways, they are anti-innovation, anti-competition. So we want to do something about it. And the last reason is fun. I think we decided a decentralized infrastructure system they're just more interesting. There's more you can do. They're more playful. There's more fun. We want to have fun again. It's kind of gotten a bit boring with the way things are going. So to the topic of this talk, how do we make decentralization a reality? And honestly, I'm not going to really give you guys a clear answer to that, but I will talk around the subject, and I would love to hear more of your ideas. One of the ways that's kind of obvious is really having a clear business model and making a lot of money. If you make a shit ton of money, using a decentralized platform, it will likely persist and maintain. However, that's not the only mechanism. And one of the things that we thought about was the sort of Spread Firefox campaign. And how do people get Firefox into enough homes to make it a kind of household name? And that was really about having a really clear mission and vision, having something that was usable and useful that people wanted, and really a large enough movement and energy of people going out, telling their mother and grandfather, go and install this web browser, it's better than anything Microsoft has, take them down, they're evil. And so that's one of the things that we're thinking about in terms of what can we do to make decentralization more successful. It's kind of business models and having this sort of social success metric. So as part of that, what are we actually doing within re-decentralize.org? It's basically trying to raise awareness of what this is and what it's about. Between me and kind of Francis, we did a lot of talking to the New Yorker and Tech News and BBC and trying to get them to actually do podcasts and write stories about this and start getting people interested and thinking about alternatives. clarifying why it's important, why we're doing this, why it's kind of cool, and identifying existing projects and trying to build a community and a momentum around what's happening. So one of the things that we do is we maintain this list of alternative kind of internet projects. At the moment, we've got about 180 different projects around the world. It's on GitHub. Yeah, I think you can see the URL just at the top. This is the kind of more prettier version instead of just seeing the GitHub list. But it's all linked from re-decentralize.org as well, the GitHub page. And it's had over 100 contributors. So we've had over 100 people adding projects that they know about and listing them here so that people can find them and look into them. The other thing we're doing is we've been doing interviews. So we've got about 20 different interviews with founders of some of these projects, asking them about what they're doing and why. Have they thought about a business model? Have they got designers? What's the technology? What's interesting about it? What's innovative? If anyone wants to help and actually do interviews, because they're actually quite a lot of work, come and talk to me afterwards or get in touch on the Twitters. And we have a mailing list. This is an open liberal list that you can join, and there's actually discussions around different things that are going on there. So when we're kind of identifying projects, what we're looking for is things that actually solve problems that exist. So one of the conversations I've recently been having is with people who work on the semantic web. So I don't know how many of you guys know about RDF and the joys of that, but it has a brilliant vision. But a lot of the times there is a lot of work that's done to semantify things. There isn't necessarily an actual problem that is being solved. And it's really important to not just go into things with a solution in mind, where there is actually currently a better, faster way of solving the problem. I think you need to have a problem, and you need to have something that is really addressing that problem in a different way that gives you or the end user some kind of benefit. Secondly, we're looking for things that are simple and usable, at least on the application layer. Ultimately, I think things don't really have an impact if they're not usable, if people don't get them. I recently for the 10th time, tried to set up encryption on my email. And I'm trying to do all this in all kinds of ways without resorting to having to host a mail server. Like, I just do not want to host a mail server. I'm not going to do it. I don't have time. It's just not going to happen, right? And I looked into Fastmail. I looked into something else. It's just not as pretty as Gmail. So I thought, okay, I can get a wrapper for Gmail, right? There's this mail envelope app that adds PGP to Gmail. But again, it's just like, it's miserable. You have to follow all these steps to actually make it work. And you obviously have to exchange keys with everybody. And there isn't good guidance. And I just still haven't got around to it. And I'm somebody who cares about it. Ultimately, clearly, I maybe don't care enough, or I'm too busy. But even still, if it's, if I just I'm not doing it, then there's something not quite there. And it needs to be simpler. And then last thing is business models. I think it's all well and good to sort of be like, right, we love open source. Actually, all our projects are open source that we look into. That's great. But if you don't have a business model, you're less likely to be around, like 10 years from now, and that makes kind of a bit less interesting. So please have business models. Just some examples that I just want to quickly talk about that we found as part of our project is, one is Servo project. So this is a mesh network between mobile phone devices that lets you have phone calls without internet or mobile or telecommunication signal. So it just works from device to device. You might have heard of the proprietary version called FireChat. I think it's a little bit more popular. But this is an open source project in Australia that's been around for actually a few years and has a crowdsource. And this is really interesting because obviously it means that you can talk to people and get in touch underground, on top of mountains, or in a disaster situation where normal networks have gone down. Secondly, another one is sort of friends of mine who do Mailpile, which is the attempt to have a usable encrypted version of Gmail. It still hasn't quite launched in a sort of user-friendly way, but it's all open source and they are working on it. And my hope is that people will take this on and offer it as a service, offer a hosted version of this for money or for something that people can use. And they very much have put a lot of energy and effort into making the encryption part as easy and user-friendly as possible. One of the earlier projects I interviewed probably a good year and a half ago, they've got some funding since, is a sort of flat sort of type of a private virtual sort of VPN, but it's not really a VPN. It's more of a kind of local area network that you can have with computers in your group, which means you can work together or you can play Minecraft from the same server easier, which I hear is a good use of that. That works obviously via everyone who installs it, but also through supernodes. So it's a kind of a peer-to-peer sort of network that connects you to people and gets around some of the security layers. Right, so what next? What can we do? What can we do to really make decentralization a reality? So some things that we're already doing, I've talked about raising awareness, clarifying, identifying, building community, and feel free to help. The things that we kind of really want to do next is help with the user experience and business models and the adoption of projects, and really find projects that have these unique selling points that could propel them to genuinely compete or surpass existing companies and incumbents, or really provide something so new and different that they can do something that the Googles and Facebooks just simply can't do, and it's really changing the rules. Like that's what we're interested in. That's part of our interest in Ethereum as well, and that is something that and then obviously the next step is just win. And as part of that, one of the things that I want to do is I want to hire a community manager. I had this brilliant idea. I thought it was brilliant. I thought I'd run it by you guys, and you can tell me how silly it sounds. It's a crowdsourcer conference. I thought people could pledge different amounts, and depending on how much money we get, we either do something small, just like hang out in like some university rooms in London, or if we get over 1,000 people, do something big. Hey, maybe we can make it a 2-day conference, maybe a 3-day, and actually use, because I'm not sadly lying around on piles of cash, although if anyone here is rich, come find me after. And wants to sponsor this thing. But I did like the idea of getting people to sort of pre-pledge ticket attendances, and actually that would allow us to firstly gauge the size of the event and actually put it on and make it happen, and really bring the kind of community together, help people kind of cross-pollinate ideas and make stuff happen. The other thing we're trying to do is help meetups happen all over the world. So I've been running the London ones, and I'm going to sort of restart them soon. And there's also kind of people trying to do them in DC and San Francisco and other places. And so that's kind of one things that are happening, and getting regular updates in the space. And that is how I'm hoping to make decentralization a reality. Thank you very much for coming, and come and say hi afterwards. Any questions? Questions? No.
Anybody got any questions? There we go.
It was so spellbinding. No one could. Hey.
Hi. You mentioned something about, all the sort of the negative side of centralized system.
Yeah.
But there are also negative side from a decentralized system as well.
Yeah.
What do you think about those? I mean, one of the things is obviously quality. It's always been a problem associated with a decentralized system, and also, income equality as well, in a sense. When you have a centralized system, sometimes it can maintain a sort of a equal system, maybe not fair, because small guys are hard to compete, but they do sort of maintain a system that's more equal in a sense. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think centralization has a huge amount of benefits, right? In many ways, it's control. It's being able to kind of make things more reliable, updating things. Making sure. I don't know if you guys know about the Skype fiasco of why Skype ultimately probably switched from being peer-to-peer. But centralization has many benefits, and that is why it's kind of winning. And it's also something we're all doing and trying anyway. My point is, hey, let's give decentralization a go. Let's see what's possible there. And I'm not saying there aren't going to be challenges. I think there are. I think there are reasons why centralization has kind of currently won out. But with increasing sophistication, in terms of also performance and speed that we can now achieve, I think decentralization is becoming more viable for certain services. And I think there are other benefits that it provides that centralization doesn't. So it's worth exploring. But that is not to say that centralization doesn't have, doesn't have things going for it. Like it totally obviously does.
I see the benefits of decentralization, but I think a lot of the reason why this like systems are centralized most of the time is because there is more motivation to build a centralized system rather than decentralized.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the reason like why we have like Facebook Messenger and other things that are only single site, because the only way they have motivation to kind of keep going at it is because it's only their own. So yeah, I just find how do you think we can kind of make this change into the centralized system and keep the motivation?
So the reason Facebook and Gmail and all these other people offer chat is ultimately to keep you around using their app longer, right? So if you're also using it for chat and other things, you're kind of more locked in, and that is obviously something that in some ways will become less prevalent and weaker if you end up using open standards and people can use other systems. I don't think it's going to be that damaging. I think ultimately, if you think about what it is that people actually want, also, in some ways these different companies are trying to fill people's needs. They're trying to provide provide value to them, which is why these services are being used. And I think when I sit there and think I want to send a photo to my grandmother about my weekend or something else, I'm not sitting there saying, you know what, I really want to log into Odnoklassniki, which is the Russian equivalent of Facebook, and send her a photo. That is not the thing that I want to do. It's not, that is not what's adding value to me. What I want to do is just be able to send it to her and for her to be able to see it using the software that she's got used to using. So I hope that by having competing open services that are big enough, that are using open standards, and that will force others to also switch to open standards, that it will be obvious that people aren't just going to move away. People are still going to probably like Facebook or Google as long as they're providing valuable services. But by allowing these services to talk to each other and use kind of shared standards, you actually are allowing people to gain a genuine value from the interaction. So I think there is this other side. I don't know if that really answered your question, because you sort of started talking about decentralization, but I kind of got distracted with Facebook Messenger, because it's not about.
I think, for instance, like medical companies, the only way they have motivation to develop new drugs is if there is a proper patent law that protects their inventions, so they can get some money out of it later on. So obviously it would be nice to have a open source drug development and cheap drugs, and like probably people would like it. But I'm just saying that I'm not sure it's what's the route towards that situation. I don't see why what's the motivation for them? I see it. We might approach to this sort of solution at some point in the future. I don't see why those companies would want to transition.
Sort of. Okay, I think in sort of chemical-based companies, it's kind of hard. You know, when you're making ice cream or drugs, that's kind of these things that you're selling. But if you're in a sort of mechanical, electronic design industries, open source makes a lot of sense. So especially for small companies, they don't have to hire engineers to design embedded chips, for example. So if you look at the Adapt project, they were doing for what they were doing for IoT, and part of that is to incorporate open source element into it, so that small companies can design things for customers. They can focus on customers instead of all this engineering R&D money into it. So I think that's the incentive.
Yeah, I would just say that I think the incentive mechanisms for different industries are different. I think within tech, open source provides a huge amount of benefit, and you do see a lot of companies investing in it, and it drives a huge amount of innovation. In the medical industry, that's not currently the case. Incentive mechanisms and frameworks can change through legislation, or people buying things differently and making a choice. If you decided to only buy drugs from a sort of ethical type producer that produced open source drugs or something, and millions or billions of people followed you, that would probably become a more viable business model in the future.
Part of the reason that it takes $1 billion to develop a new cancer drug is $700 million worth of testing. So in a very decentralized society, where people were willing to publish the results of their medical histories, right? You could imagine that you would have people who would take relatively experimental drugs, publish the results, and other people would do the analysis on the which is what we do now, right? And other people would then do the statistical analysis to spot things like drug-drug interactions early.
Yeah.
So it's possible to do a very, very different approach to drug development, which is much more decentralized and much more transparent.
Much more crowdsourced and in line with transparency, open access, open data type.
Exactly, right? Which has
ecosystem,
a very, very similar risk profile to the current approach.
Yep.
Right? But it's much, much more granular because you can assess the risk a few patients at a time. These guys are certainly going to die. Do you want to try it? These guys are only about 50% going to die. Well, would you want to try this or do you want to do the conventional drug? And slowly you build up this portfolio of know-how. So this notion that part of what comes with decentralization is a different granularity of risk that has to be made because you don't have an enormous central decision, which is $1 billion investment.
But you need a network of trust, right? And you need a network of something that's reliable, so that you can send this out, this testing to the network, and have something that comes back in a way that you can quality assure it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And understand the provenance, and that's really the challenges.
Funny you should mention provenance, right? But I mean, it does come down when you get down to this notion that if you've got the right architecture, it might well be possible to do a lot of these things that people think we need centralization for, and you get this benefit because it changes the risk landscape. And if we've got a high trust society with this very, very, very different risk landscape, seems like it might be overall much more economically efficient.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, this is kind of the bit where, when I talked about the competition, the fun, this is kind of what I'm talking about, which is, yes, it has challenges, but at the same time, it opens up new models and new possibilities, and it's just kind of interesting. And not enough people are doing it, essentially. Right.
Any more questions?
So this is not currently in any existence. I might try and register it as a company limited by guarantee, sort of non-profit. So far, it's been like a side hobby project of mine and Francis, who's actually full-time CEO of ScraperWiki. So like between us, we haven't been very effective. But like I said, I'm planning to kind of launch it, and I'm looking for people to come and help and get involved. So just depending on the scale of things, I will probably be formalizing some kind of system.
One sec.
Hi, do you think that decentralized projects struggle to get the momentum that centralized projects do, no matter how good an idea they are? And do you think there's a reason behind that?
Yes, I mean, okay, so I think they do struggle more, and part of that is that we don't have really good business models yet, right? Like, so you can do centralized stuff and you can do it free, and you can get loads of investor money to promote it and market it because you can go sell the data, or you can be like, don't worry guys, Google's going to buy us because our user chart's going to go like this. You know, you've got all this kind of different stuff that you don't necessarily have if you're doing something decentralized. The other aspect is actually a lot of people who are working on decentralized projects are people who want to make the world a better place, right? They're people who are like, I'm going to do it open source, I'm going to do it for ethical reasons. They're not necessarily hard-minded, business-minded people who are like, where can I exploit something here? You know, like a lot of the people we interviewed are all like, you know, middle-aged white guys in basements working by themselves. And part of the reason I'm doing this is to be like, hey, man, you don't have to be in a basement, white or middle-aged, or a man. You could sort of get into this, even if you are a hard-nosed businessman or woman, trying to you know make an impact here actually financially as well. And there are opportunities, but so far it's not the easiest path. Partly because of performance, partly because of technology, part of like other reasons that you guys are probably aware of. So historically, it's not been the case.
Well, if you look at something like BitTorrent, I think that's the big one.
BitTorrent is the big one, but BitTorrent is also, yeah.
BitTorrent isn't perfect.
Did you say BitTorrent isn't perfect or is perfect? Okay,
Isn't
perfect. Yeah, BitTorrent is images, and you know, and also like obviously, you know, people have been excited by also Bitcoin and other things, and there's a lot of different reasons why it's exciting, and a lot of it is sort of speculation, a lot of it is other stuff, and that has shadowed some of the kind of perceptions I would find. I think there's still more innovation to come.
Any more questions?
Awesome. I'm going to take that as a no, and I can go back to sitting down drinking wine. Thanks, everyone.